Elected for the third time in May, MLA Norm Letnick has proven to be a popular choice in Kelowna-Lake country. The one-time city councillor has represented this riding since 2009, but for the first time, his BC Liberal Party sits in opposition. Norm Letnick today on Upfront. Let's start with the May election and go back to that. Your party had the most seats in the election, but the other parties were able to form a coalition and govern. What did it mean to you when you first realized that your party was no longer in power for the first time since 2001?
Well, that's an excellent question, Tim. We went from the high of the election night, Steve and I and Ben, 60%, sorry, Christy. Yeah, that's right. How quickly we forget. Christy and Steve and I got roughly 60% of the vote, so we thought yes, all the way. And as the night went on and on and on, we realized that it was going to be really close. So we did win the most seats, but we lost the majority by one MLA, and the other party was able to make a coalition with the Greens. And that's the way our system works. It is, I believe, the best system because it provides with an opportunity for parties to present their platforms to the public, and then for the public to vote not only on the leader and the local candidate, but also what the party is promising to do between elections. And that helps to hold them to account. So we adjusted. We had to get used to the idea of being in opposition. No, I don't think I ever ran to be in opposition, but you buy the ticket and you take the ride, and that's the way it works.
What do you think, as a party, did you learn from that message from the voters?
Well, there was two pieces. One locally with 60% of the vote and the highest plurality in the province of any BC Liberal, which means the difference in my vote compared to my second place vote was the biggest spread, was, I think, a vote of confidence on behalf of my constituents to our team here that we were doing a relatively good job, and they wanted us to continue to advance their priorities in Victoria. So that was a positive message. The other more sobering message, I guess, was as a party, as a team across the province, we did not provide the same level of understanding of issues to other places, and in particular, you have to look at it, it's the Lower Mainland, which the NDP promised free crossings of the Port Mann Bridge, a better sensitivity to taxi issues, which helped get them a few seats in Surrey. So you look at what happened in the Lower Mainland, and I think that describes the difference between the rural BC, which mostly went for our party, and the urban BC, which we lost a few seats, something like 10 seats, which went over to the NDP and the Greens.
After so many years in power, how are you finding the difference being in opposition?
Well, my priority, and I would assume priority of all MLAs, is the same, which is to advocate on behalf of my local constituents. So I have a list that I made up in the last election of things I would fight for should I get reelected. That list is in my office. It's it's promptly posted.
Front and center.
That's right there, and I like putting check marks by some of the things as I can. So that's my priority. I continue to fight for those things. I meet with ministers now from the NDP in the hallways, in the legislature, to talk about that list and items that I believe they can help with. And so if it's a 4-year mandate, I have 4 years to deliver on those things to my constituents, and if it's shorter, I have less time. So I'm not holding back. I'm there aggressively trying to get those items passed as fast as I can.
Now, the coalition is tenuous at best. I mean, the numbers just don't...
You mean the Green NDP coalition?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, are you guys ready? Are you ready as an MLA? Is the Liberal Party ready if, for example, an election was suddenly called maybe over Site C, for example? I mean, you have an interim leader in Rich Coleman, but would you be ready as a party for a snap election?
Well, it depends on when it happens. I don't think there's going to be a snap election anytime between now and maybe the spring. They might come in with a new budget and say, we need a new mandate, and off they go. That's a possibility. Some people are suggesting that. Others suggest 18 months, 2 years. Others say they're going to go the full term of 4.5 years. I'm not going to get into that game. My team is ready to go. Our signs are in my garage. ready to be put up on the streets. Our team is, just a team of volunteers like everybody else, and we're prepared. So if there's an election called in the spring, or if it's in 4 years, we'll be ready for a good fight.
And of course, the riding of Kelowna West is a by-election there. That could increase the numbers further for the Liberal Party and get it even closer.
Well, we're gonna do everything we can to make sure that Ben Stewart is re-elected, and that means knocking on doors, making phone calls, getting the vote out, all the normal things you do in an election. We'll be doing them by election, and hopefully we'll see the three amigos of Steve, Ben, and I back in the legislature together, advocating for our constituents locally. We've been very successful with that approach, which is regional in nature, and making sure that the priorities of the region are articulated to Victoria, and those funds come from Victoria back to our central Okanagan. It really helps, rather than having one MLA fighting against another MLA who might be the neighbor one for resources. If you take it at a higher level, we can do things on transportation, we can do things on healthcare, on education, on daycare, on public safety, all helping improve the lives of our people in the whole area and the province, of course.
Yeah, let's talk about the Liberal leadership a little bit. I want to ask you who you support, because I know it's a bit of a secret for now. But there was a debate here in Kelowna recently, and I had a chance to go there as part of the broadcast crew, and it was quite interesting. I guess maybe your thoughts on some of the ta-ta-ta going on there.
Well, I kind of had the feeling that there would be a little bit of to and fro going on, because we're not sitting anymore. This was the first debate following the session. So during the session, it's kind of tough to go after your opponent as a leader, because the NDP, every time they could, would use something a candidate said against them in the House. Right? So they don't, we don't want to give them any ammunition, obviously. But now the House is done for the fall. We won't be back until the middle of February, which means our leader will be selected by then. So, it was understandable that all the gloves came off for this debate, and they did. And if anybody hasn't seen it, it's entertaining, and they should go online and have a look at it.
Would you declare a winner anywhere in there at all?
Well, I'll declare a winner once I announce who I'm supporting.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
but I think the winner is democracy. You look at the quality of the candidates that we have. They're outstanding. We have 6 outstanding people who want to be leader of this party, as opposed to the NDP that didn't have a race at all. John Horgan was basically acclaimed as the leader. So I think democracy on our side is the beneficiary. No matter who gets elected in February as our leader, you can be sure that 100% of us are going to be right there supporting that new leader and the new team that the leader puts together to make sure that we hold the NDP Green coalition to account, and we're ready to form government should we get the privilege of doing that again.
Now, the next time you have an election, it might look a whole lot different in terms of how we elect our MLAs. What are your thoughts on electoral reform? As a party, the Liberal Party's come out and said they're opposed to that type of anything other than first past the post, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the past, and this is before I became an MLA in 2009 for the first time, in the past we had 2 referendums on proportional representation. Both failed. The second one, the more recent one, failed even worse than the first one did. So, I'm not opposed to the NDP Greens asking the people of BC what they think about proportional representation. The process, though, has to be fair, and this one's not.
Are you opposed to the 50+1? Is that part of it?
Well, even the pundits in Victoria have come out and said it's all skewed in one side, right? So it's no longer 60%, it's down to 50% plus 1, which is the lowest threshold. There's no threshold for how many people is required to vote. So you can get 10% of the people showing up to vote, which would tie the hands of everybody in the province. Also, there's no accounting for rural BC, right? In the other referendums, you had to have 60% plus 6% of the MLAs, right? Of the ridings. There's none of that anymore. So really, when you look at the population base, which is down in the Lower Mainland, the Lower Mainland can make the decision for the whole province as to what our system will be for electing MLAs. So the process, I believe, is skewed towards an outcome that the Greens and NDP want, which is proportional representation, because they believe that will keep them in power for a long time. that we can have that debate as well as to whether it's going to benefit them or hurt them.
Is it a threat at all to your party, do you think?
Well,
I mean, the Coalition of the Right's been the BC Liberal Party for a while now.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. My major concern is the process, making sure it's fair, so the people of BC can vote in a fair way that represents all of British Columbia, not just the Lower Mainland. That's my number one concern. That enough people will come out and vote that can really make the mandate for everybody else. So, if you only get 10%, I don't think that's right. There should be a minimum threshold. Maybe 50% of the people need to get out and vote to make the change. Yeah. After that, really, I believe that if it does change, it'll provide for minority governments, whether they're free enterprise governments like us or more socialist governments like the NDP Greens. It'll provide for more minority governments for a long, long time. And if you look around the world, I don't believe they're working very well. You have governments like Germany that just fell again, right? Yeah. How many times do you have to try different coalitions to get the right mix? And the most important thing for me there is, how do you hold your MLA accountable if you don't elect them anymore? If they're appointed with proportional representation by the party announcing, okay, well, here's our list of people, and we're going to appoint this person to Kelowna, for example. Right. How do you hold them accountable? It's going to be impossible. So I prefer the current system. Even if I don't win, or don't run, I still prefer the current system, right, because you can hold someone accountable to their promises. And the Green Party leader already said, Andrew Weaver said after the election, that the NDP promises were, quote, irrelevant. They were irrelevant because no longer did they have a majority. The only way they were in power was because of the Green Party. So only way they're going to deliver on their promises now is with the support of the Green Party. Well, I don't think that's right. I don't think that gives us stable government over the long term. And that's why I believe, first of all, the process has to be fair. This one isn't. Mm-hmm. And the outcome needs to, in my mind anyway, the preferred outcome is first past the post, because that will give us the best government going forward. It's worked
for many, many years, I guess, in this country, or has it? Let's talk one more question about the election. The proposal to move it from May to October, does that bother you at all?
No, it doesn't. It's for 4 years, 4.5 years. They're not talking about 7 years of power, right? So it's just a few months. There'll be some advantages and disadvantages politically for the NDP Greens, but I think at the end of the day, it's a wash. So if they want to put 6 more months in, I'm not concerned about it.
All right, we'll take a short break and come back with more with Kelowna-Lake Country MLA Norm Letnick. Let's talk a little bit about the Ministry of Agriculture, which you were a part of before, and of course the economy. I guess, what did you feel you learned most from being a Minister of Agriculture? Well,
being a Minister of any portfolio is kind of a cheerleader role, a leadership role, a policymaker role. So I learned a lot about working at that level, and that was a privilege that I got for 4 years. So thank you to the people for giving me that privilege. And of course, I learned a lot about agriculture, agri-foods. I'm an urban type. I live in Kelowna, so I didn't grow up on a farm. Right. I'm not familiar with the sea and what grows in the sea, so I learned a lot over the course of those 4 years. Yeah. We have an amazing group of people out there growing food for us and processing food. Over 62,000 people directly employed in agri-foods in BC. It's a record year in that, in jobs. It was a record year in profits, record year in sales, record year in exports. Mm-hmm. We never had it so good. No, if you look at specific niches in the agri-foods, there'll always be challenges one way or the other, because there's 300 commodities on the land and in the water. Yeah. But overall, agri-foods is rock and rolling. So it was a privilege, like I said, to serve as the minister for 4 years.
Is there anything you regret from that time, or do you wish maybe you had a little more time to do or finish?
I would say just continue where we were. We had built up, the industry was built up quite a bit, as I said, record growth, record profits. Continue to attract more young people. As I went around the province, I met a lot of young people in agri-foods.
Mm-hmm. That's been a challenge for a while, hasn't it?
Well, people are aging out, right? The boomers are getting older and want to retire at some point. But you'll find that a lot of people in agriculture continue into their late 60s and 70s because they love what they're doing. It's a lifestyle choice as well for some. But a lot of young people are getting involved in agriculture and all around the province, and whether they're taking over their parents' farms or their processing businesses, or getting involved with a new form of agri-foods, some innovation, they are there. And I think one of the biggest constants I saw around the industry over the last 4 years was the use of technology. Just pervasive, how technology is taking over a lot of the aspects of agri-foods and making it more productive and more profitable for the owners. So that's probably the one thing I would have liked to have continued on, and I'm sure that the current minister, Lana Popham, is focused also on making sure that agriculture and agri-foods is there for young people.
As you're in the opposition now, in the agriculture critic, how does that change that perspective, and what kinds of things will you be pushing? Or do you think the current government might change something?
Well, I'm pretty sure the current government will make changes. That's the purpose of government, is to listen to the people and then advance improvements, right? As far as being the critic goes, I'm just the critic until the new leader is selected. I offered to be a co-critic to help Ian Payton, who is the other MLA that's co-critic, to get his feet under him because he's a brand new MLA. But Ian is an awesome gentleman with an extensive pedigree in agriculture himself. So at that point, then I will take a step back and he will be the sole critic for agriculture, agri-foods, and I'll find something else to do in addition to advancing the priority needs of my constituents.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions from viewers, and they do pertain to agriculture. Here's one of them now.
Why is it difficult to get organic beef, more organic beef, or easier to get it here in the Okanagan? Because that's such a healthy element for you.
The organic industry is huge. It's getting more and more market share all the time throughout British Columbia. At the end of the day, though, it is a market-driven industry. The government does not get involved with picking winners or losers.
It's a supply and demand kind of thing.
It is. And so what we've done is we're supporting or we were as a government, but I'm pretty sure the new government will be supporting the Certified Organics Association of British Columbia as it tries to increase the amount of market share for organics in the province. When we were in government, we passed legislation and regulations that would say that if you're going to advertise organic, you must be certified as organic to do that. And again, I'm pretty sure the current government will continue with that. And so what that means is when you go to your farmers markets or your stores, if someone's going to use the label organic on it, then you know it's really organic, not organic-like or fresh-like or whatever. And I think that will help the organic industry continue to penetrate the traditional markets. So this person that's looking for more organic meats will, I hope, be able to find it. And also I would advise them to look at some apps. There are different apps that they can get that will identify who is selling organic products, and that might help them get to the meat products they're looking for.
Okay, well, we have another question from a viewer. Let's take that now.
I'm originally from this area, and when I moved back a couple years ago, I noticed that a lot of the orchards had recently been switched over to wineries, or it seems like that's happening. And so I guess my question is whether anyone's looking into how all of these orchards being turned into wineries and how that's affecting our food security.
Now, drinking wine is great for our local economy, and it's certainly fun to have after a meal, for example. But when we're talking about food security, is it a good idea to keep converting orchards into vineyards?
Well, I guess the first question is, how do you define food security? In the 4 years that I was the minister, I always defined that as food supply security, or BC food security, because what we're looking for is to make sure we have the capacity to grow enough food to feed ourselves, right? British Columbia, because of all the mountains and water that we have, it'll be difficult. We need to be a trading
climate too, right?
And the climate, that's right, which is changing. You go up to the Robson Valley, they're growing corn now, which they were never growing before. You go up to the Peace Country, all kinds of things. You got wineries, fruit wineries right now up in Prince George that might be growing grapes at some point. So with climate change, things are changing for sure. But at the end of the day, the government is not going to tell the farmer what they can grow and what they can't grow. So if someone wants to grow grapes on their land and turn those grapes into wine, that's their call. what my goal was, and still is to make sure that we have the capacity to grow food on the land. So if we are growing food on the land, and let's say something drastic happens where we need to feed ourselves more than what we're currently doing because our trading relationship with the States collapses or something else and we can't import food from California, well then the market will dictate that those grapes are not the highest and best value for the land anymore. Maybe it's vegetables or something else. So the goal is to get more land in production, whether it's in grapes or in barley or in hops for beer or whatever. The goal is to get more land in production so that the land is ready, because the soil has to be treated right. So that you get more land in production, you get more people who know how to farm the land, whether it's again grapes or something else. And should food security or food supply security dictate a different crop mix, well then you're ready to go, as opposed to having land that's lying fallow, that's has nothing on it, or worse, has a ballpark on it, or a foundation of some kind on it, and then you have to turn that land into producing agricultural land. The other piece too, and I think it's very controversial, always has been, is the use of our oceans for food supply. 100 out of the 300 commodities that we produce here in BC come from the water. So that's everything from oysters to farm salmon. And farm salmon is actually our #1 export product. For food, it really is by far, one of those areas that economically creating jobs, especially for First Nations along the coast, is really important. But for me, producing protein at a much smaller environmental footprint than producing protein in some other ways in our province. So it is something we need to do right. We're not 100% there yet, for sure, but we want to continue to support our wild salmon industry and also continue to find better ways of doing farm salmon, because that is part of our food supply security question as well.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about NAFTA. Tough negotiations going on right now between Canada, the US, and Mexico. Some people are saying, you know what, we'd be better off without a deal and just falling under, World Trade Organization rules and tariffs, for example. Do you buy that? Do you think that's a fair assessment if they're asking too much, for example?
Well, British Columbia is a trading province, and so is Canada. If we didn't trade, standard of living would be a lot less. So I'm a grandfather now. I have a 2-year-old grandchild, and I think the best thing for her and for all her cohort of grandchildren is to continue that expansion of our trade relationship. And that's why I supported the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations and worked to make sure that would go through. It didn't, because the States pulled out of it. CETA, so our Canadian-European trade agreement, again, is something I support, and I also support NAFTA. The lower the barriers to trade, the more prosperous our province and our country will be, and more opportunities for young people growing up in this province, so that they can continue to see an opportunity not only to provide products domestically, but also internationally. I think if we close the borders down with closing NAFTA, closing TPP, closing CETA, and just rely amongst ourselves to do internal trade, our quality of life will be a lot less.
Do you think, let's talk about softwood a little bit, because that's always been a contentious issue in this province, and it's not really part of NAFTA, but we keep, this has been going on since the 80s. I think it's around 4 or 5 now. We just keep succumbing to the United States and paying duties and tariffs and that kind of thing. Where do you see this going? I mean, is this ever going to get solved?
Geez, that's a question beyond my capability of answering. I can just tell you.
What's the best for the province?
Well, the best for the province is to have an open trade relationship with the States, including on softwood. But there's some greedy people in the States, and even though
strong lobby, isn't it?
Well, and they have, they see the dollar signs, and even though they're doing really well right now, it's still an opportunity for them to do even better if they can stop our products from coming in. It means that they're inflating their own products. Of course, that's making homes in the States more expensive to build, which is not something that the current president said that was one of his goals. So we're doing what we can as part of subnational jurisdiction. It really is country to country, so it's Ottawa that has to fight for us. But we were doing what we could with Steve Thompson as the minister beforehand, and now with this new government, I'm sure they're doing whatever they can as well to see this conflict end between us and move forward.
Could we sell to other countries more? For example, China seems to be demanding more wood, for example. We keep relying on the U.S. for all our exports. It's going to come back and bite us, isn't it?
Well, the nice thing about our 16 years in power was we saw a transition from being very United States centric, like the rest of the country is, to I think it's less than 50% now of our exports going to the States. So, we transitioned quite a bit. A lot of it, of course, is going to the Far East.
We're fortunate that we're on the coast.
We're on the
right?
coast,
Yeah.
right? And by some means of geography, it's actually shorter to come to Vancouver than it is to go down to lower United States or something, right? So that's great. We have a competitive advantage there. Thanks to Premier Campbell and his ministers, and then Christy Clark and her ministers, especially Steve Thompson, we're able to continue to see growth in those other markets. And again, I think this goes beyond politics. I'm pretty sure that the current government will do their best as well to continue that relationship building that we have with other countries.
I want to talk a little bit about the legalization of marijuana scheduled for July 1st or July 4th, 2018. The NDP just announced today how the province is going to do it, run by the liquor distribution branch with the ability for private stores to sell marijuana. I guess, what are your initial thoughts when you hear about that?
The devil's in the details. We still need the details. I don't think they've worked out all the details other than the age will be 19, from what I saw today in the announcement, and the liquor distribution branch will be the only wholesaler going to both private and public stores.
Sounds very similar to the way that alcohol is sold in the province.
Exactly. Yeah. I think you got it right, Tim. The number one thing for me is how do we make sure organized crime is out of it, if that's even possible. I don't know.
And is that really just keeping the price lower?
Well, again, it has to be competitive. If the price isn't competitive, then the people will find other less expensive ways to get their products.
For sure, yeah.
And then, the government's ability to provide a good product at a fair price will be gone. And of course, the tax revenues that the government's looking for to fund things like, more policing or providing money for municipal governments to handle these issues will be gone. So it's a complicated thing. The federal government passed the legislation. I'm not here to comment one way or the other on the federal government's decision to do it. But the province is now in the position where it needs to implement. This first step is okay, but again, we need more details as to what the government has planned for distribution.
With climate change and everything, how do you get people, especially here in the Okanagan and Kelowna, how do you get people out of their cars and into the buses and that kind of thing?
Well, it's progressive. It's not going to happen overnight. I committed in the last election to work on finishing the 6th laning of Highway 97, which we're doing, moving Rutland Road away from 97 with a roundabout. That's happening. Continue with the work of connecting Glenmore with UBC Okanagan and the highway and the airport through John Hindle Drive. That's happening. Well, what it will do is allow cars to flow more freely, and that will reduce the pollution. They're not going to be sitting waiting for 3 lights and spewing out. At the same time, we, over the 8 years that I was in the government side, we brought in a lot of money for improving the transit service. Bus Rapid Transit came under us. We have the exchange in Rutland that came under us. Increased transit hours again. So, in partnership, of course, with the local municipalities, it's close to 50-50. So I want to continue pushing for that. So it's a matter of making sure you have the right infrastructure for moving cars and products on our roads, and also increasing the availability and convenience of the transit options. Another thing that I think is going to be huge, maybe not for you and I, but for our kids and their kids, is the fact that we put in over $7 million to buy the rail trail. That will be used from Kelowna to Vernon, of course, for pedestrians and bikes for now. But in the future, who knows? That might be a light rail corridor in addition to that, right? So I think that was very important to work on. And then the last piece, in addition to more transit, is fixing some of the bottlenecks that we still have left, like the one at Beaver Lake Road and Glenmore and Highway 97. That's a big problem there, amongst others. But transit, and transportation, like anything else, it's progressive. You do a little bit, because it's very expensive.
One final question: what's on your wish list for Christmas this year?
Every year, I wish people would get out, enjoy the time with their family, and volunteer as much as they can. Whether it's in from the cold, volunteering there, or the gospel mission, or the food bank, or any of the other places in our community that need help. If they can volunteer, that'd be great. And if they can't volunteer, if they have some treasure that they can part with, to part with that treasure as well.